Go Long by Hazel Witch. Read by Kaiinbed. Chapter 8 Touchdown. Please note that this chapter describes consensual, explicit material between two characters portrayed as 17-year-olds. If that makes you uncomfortable, please click away now. The weekend after the wonderful football field kiss tore by like a whirlwind. An unfortunate bout of flu amongst the waitstaff at Izuku's mom's cafe saw him pulling double shifts to lend a hand, smiling politely at customers and rattling off, "Have a great day," when all he really wanted to do was bounce up and down on the spot and do a happy little victory dance. Katsuki Bakugo had kissed him. Him, Izuku Midoriya, band geek extraordinaire and veritable nobody. And it felt like the most natural thing on earth. Someone up there must be looking out for him. There was no other plausible explanation for it. Only something as extreme as divine intervention could have thrown him such a curveball, could have turned him from unobtrusive side character to romantic lead in a single night, could have blessed him with the profound experience of Katsuki's lips pressing against his own. The only slight problem was that they hadn't actually, talked afterwards, discussed what the kiss had meant, given any indication as to what they should do next. They both just sort of stumbled home in a daze. Izuku feeling about ready to cycle up amongst the stars like that scene from E.T., the extraterrestrial. You would think that living next door to each other would provide ample time and opportunity to do something as simple as having a conversation. But when Izuku trailed home after each shift, bedraggled and with a pencil tucked behind his ear, the lights were off in the Bakugo household, and he decided it could wait. Yeah, sure, he could go up to the front door and knock like a normal person, but that would require him to acknowledge what happened directly to Katsuki's face, and that was unfathomable. So the talk was still pending. He put it off until Monday, and then promptly spent all of Monday morning attempting to calm the sudden swarm of butterflies that began swirling in his gut, watching and waiting and psyching himself up to find the perfect opportunity to get Katsuki alone. The starting point was to locate him, first and foremost, the golden boy distinctly absent from all the places Izuku had thought of to go to look for him. The practice field, the jock hangout under the bleachers, the football team's table in the cafeteria. He was nowhere to be found, and Izuku was beginning to think he transferred schools at the realization he kissed the biggest loser in all of UA. He was probably off storming around and kicking things or something, figuring out all the ways he was going to make Izuku pay. "Yo, Deku." Izuku twisted to look over his shoulder, tuning out the clatters and hollers of the cafeteria around him. Katsuki stood a few feet back from their table, hands shoved deep into the pockets of the bomber he'd been wearing the first day he'd moved to town. The same ticked-off expression gracing his face that he'd had that day too. "It's you!" Izuku blurted out, already flustered and heart all aflutter. Hi." He tried to turn in his seat, but was boxed in on both sides by Ochako and Todoroki, both of them pretending to listen as Ida worked through a long-winded monologue on the virtues of using soap concentrate for the marching band's next car wash fundraiser. He settled for continuing their conversation from his contorted position. "Been looking fucking everywhere for you today. You go on a field trip to the Bermuda Triangle or some shit?" Izuku flushed. "Me too. Looking, for you. Is everything okay?" "Gotta talk to you," Katsuki muttered, staring off towards the far end of the room with a frown. "It's important." Izuku's chest tightened at the gruff tone in his voice, the familiar grip of nerve squeezing at his ribcage. Was this where the dream ended? Where Katsuki told him it all been a huge mistake and threatened him with death unless he agreed to keep his mouth shut? "Yes, yeah, sure, of course, let me just..." He stood on slightly shaky legs, empty lunch tray clutched in hand. "Give me that." Katsuki made a grab for the tray and stomped over to shove it into a rack of empties. Scowling heavily, he yanked at Izuku's forearm, dragging him towards the double doors. I'll be right back," Izuku called to Ochako as he was hauled off down the hall. Katsuki said nothing, just continued his insistent march without giving Izuku so much as a clue to what he was in for. Head down and mouth grim, he rounded a corner, Izuku trailing behind him in tow. Where are we?" "Zip it, Freckles." Flicking a quick look down either end of the empty hall, Katsuki wrenched open the door of the supply closet and tugged Izuku inside. It smelled of bleach and something musty that made his nose wrinkle. Several brooms and mops propped haphazardly against the wall. Kind of a weird place to have a serious heart-to-heart, but okay. Izuku turned to face him. So, what did you want to talk about? Before he could reach the end of his sentence, large, warm hands were at his hips, pushing him back against the rickety shelving unit, ridges of metal digging into his spine. Izuku's sharp "oh" of surprise was interrupted by the greedy mouth at his own soft lips, urgent, wanting, needing. Oh, holy hell. Katsuki's larger body covered him, pressing them chest to chest, fingers slipping beneath Izuku's button-up to brush against bare skin, leaving sparks of electricity in their wake. Izuku melted beneath them, accepting every touch that Katsuki had to give, relaxing into it, and sliding arms up to loop around his neck. He wasn't sure this was something he'd ever get used to. The idea that Katsuki liked him, wanted him. Even as he laced fingertips into golden hair, and Katsuki's hands roamed upwards, the concept remained foreign. Even as Katsuki's palms skimmed his sides, hunting for more contact, lips parting to deepen the kiss with a slide of tongue that sent heat racing through Izuku's core. It still didn't quite feel real. The growing interest between his thighs was a reality he couldn't ignore though, as was the hard, muscular leg that slid between them. He groaned quietly into Katsuki's mouth. Yeah, Katsuki agreed breathlessly, hands drifting around to the small of Izuku's back. His amber eyes were dark and heavy-lidded when Izuku pulled back enough to catch a glimpse of them, lips full and kiss slightly sore, hair mussed up and messy from the fingers weaved into it. He looked out of sorts, stupid and silly, and nothing like the sharp high school athlete Izuku knew him to be. Didn't get to do that this weekend, Katsuki murmured, their noses close enough to brush together. Been thinking about it for days. God, those words from those lips, said in that voice. It did something primal to Izuku. Every drop of adrenaline and testosterone whooshing through his veins and straight down to his crotch. Shit. There was no way Katsuki wasn't going to notice his hard-on. Izuku tried to shuffle backwards, but there was nowhere to go. Nowhere to escape when he was pinned in place beneath Katsuki's weight. He had nowhere to hide. We should probably get out of here before someone notices, he mumbled, voice hoarse and cracked, slipping his hold from Katsuki's neck. We might get caught. Katsuki made a slightly strangled noise, and dived forward to capture Izuku's lips again, pulling him forward by the hips so that he pressed more firmly against the thigh Katsuki positioned between his legs. The sound of their lips parting was somehow sinful as all hell, and when Katsuki leaned forward to whisper into his ear in that gritty, deep voice, Izuku felt ready to spontaneously combust. When you coming over to my place? Izuku could only pray his voice wouldn't give away the fact his insides had all turned to butter. Thursday? He offered, managing to keep at least some of the breathlessness at bay. I've got assignments and stuff to do before then. Katsuki looked displeased, mouth twisting to one side and eyes narrowing. You want me to wait that fucking long? Are you a sadist, Deku? That made Izuku crack a smile, even through the heady layer of lust that swaddled his thoughts like a thick winter quilt. Wednesday, then, if you help me study? Seemingly appeased with the compromise, Katsuki grunted his agreement and nodded, finally stepping back to brush down his clothes and fix his hair. Fine, Wednesday. Then, giving Izuku one last firm kiss on the mouth, he wrenched the door open and strode off down the hall like nothing had happened. He was already halfway around the corner by the time Izuku had recovered enough to follow, adjusting his ruffled clothes and taking several deep breaths. There was no one around as he stumbled back to the cafeteria, thank God. Izuku needed the brief walk to make double sure his boner had retreated back to where it belonged. Jeez, they were in school. Talk about inappropriate. Still vaguely dizzy from the unexpected encounter, he slipped wordlessly back into a seat at the table, snatching up an unopened can and pressing the cool metal to his cheek. So? Ochako prompted, nudging an elbow into his ribs. What did he want? She still didn't know the full story about what happened at the party, but Izuku's black mood in the weeks that followed had given her more than enough to make a guess. The night of the football game, she'd blown up his phone with text after text, and he knew deep down she was only pretending to swallow his lame explanation that nothing happened and that he'd just gotten lost in the crowd and headed home. It was only fair to give his best friend some credit. She was particularly astute when it came to picking up on the signals between people. In all likelihood, Ochako probably had a very good idea as to the nature of the conversation he just had with Katsuki, but something in Izuku still wanted to keep it to himself for a little bit longer. It wasn't that he didn't trust her. He did, with all his heart and soul. It was that he didn't necessarily expect whatever had struck up between him and Katsuki to last. So he lied. "Oh, nothing," he said, unconvincing even to his own ears. "Just wanted my help studying for his bio test next week." Ochako raised her eyebrows, but again appeared to let the whole thing slide. She really was the bestest of friends. "That's weird," Todoroki chipped in, even though he hadn't really been part of the conversation to begin with. "I'm in Bakugo's biology class, and he's getting top marks. He should probably be the one tutoring you, Midoriya." Izuku felt his eyes bulge slightly with panic. "Ah!" He scratched at the back of his head, desperately trying to think of another angle he could work with. "Did you mean history test, Izuku?" Ochako said pointedly. "I think we're building on some topics Bakugo hadn't covered at his old school, right?" God, he could kiss her. Platonically, of course. Yes. Sorry, I got mixed up." Todoroki looked at him plainly, but then shrugged his shoulders and seemed to accept the dubious excuse at face value. The group went back to discussing their upcoming performance. Nizuku counted his blessings that his secret relationship hadn't been exposed before it even had the chance to put down roots. Pouring every ounce of gratitude he could into the small smile he aimed Oshako's way, Izuku made a mental note to save her a slice of his mom's extra special cheesecake when he was next on shift. In the meantime, he had to face the fate of the upcoming days. Had to force himself to concentrate on schoolwork without letting his mind wander back to the way Katsuki's hands had so naturally slipped under his shirt. Maybe waiting until Wednesday was going to be a more difficult task than anticipated. The rain had just started to fall when Izuku crossed the narrow distance between their two houses. Fresh drizzle dusting his hair with a fine wet mist, but down in the Bakugo basement there was no hint of any storm raging above. A bunker of cozy warmth where they were secreted away from the world. Name the 4 lobes of the human brain. Frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. True to his word, Katsuki was actually helping him study. Nizuku was trying hard not to feel disappointed about it. He was the one that laid down the ground rules after all. Ding, ding, ding. Okay, smartass. What determines the function of a protein? Its structure? Katsuki sat back in the shabby armchair across from Izuku and flicked through the set of flashcards in his hands with a frown. An old tassel lamp warmed one side of his face with hazy yellow, the other cast in shadow. Yep, again. See? Why'd you spend so much time stressing about goddamn Stanford, huh? You're a shoo-in. Surprised, Izuku watched them for a moment. Sure, they talked about his collegiate aspirations before, but he'd always kind of presumed that anything that didn't concern Katsuki directly flew pretty much straight over his head. It was unexpected to find that a fact had actually stuck. You remembered, he said, smiling. Huh? You remembered about Stanford. Glancing up, Katsuki's frown remained tacked in place. Of course I remember. We've been yapping on about it since we met. He plucked up another card and read from it blandly. When a DNA sequence is used to synthesize mRNA, the process is called what? Transcription. Katsuki nodded. Correct. Socked feet a little cold. Katsuki had forced him to toe off damp sneakers on the porch before allowing him entry. Izuku pulled his legs up to his chest, rubbing a frayed sweater sleeve over his lips. There was a pause before Katsuki peered out from beneath furrowed brows, eventually asking a question that was definitely not on the syllabus. So, why Stanford? What do you want to do there? Oh, another surprise. Almost like Katsuki actually wanted to get to know him or something. He sat there looking expectant, legs wide in that easy confidence Izuku always considered a marvel. Well, Izuku began slowly, feeling a little like an interview candidate with Katsuki staring across at him so steadily. The why part is easy. My mom had a friend that lived nearby, and we went to visit when I was a kid. It was the start of the semester, and there were freshmen everywhere. all with cardboard boxes moving into the dorms, and it just all felt so alive, so big and exciting, like anything was possible. The total opposite of what it's like here. I've wanted to go there ever since. The memory of the sunny September day gave him a fond sense of nostalgia. And as for what I want to do there, Izuku hooked his chin over his knees. I guess that's what I'm hoping to find out. To find out where I belong. He chewed on his lip, thinking. All I know is that I want to do something good, meaningful. I thought about medicine or law or maybe becoming a teacher. I'm not sure yet. I just know I want to do my absolute best to leave the world a better place. There was another beat of silence in which Katsuki looked at him like he just quoted a passage in some unknown ancient language. Then he grinned, all flashy teeth. You want to be a hero. I want to help people, Izuku corrected. Yeah, that's what I said. They held eye contact for a while without saying anything, Katsuki's face settling into something altogether softer. Izuku was the first to look away, nerves suddenly jangled and pulse swelling with the way Katsuki was looking at him. Alright, Katsuki said, nipping another flashcard from the pile. A harder one for you this time. Yeah. Katsuki made a show of looking over the handwritten text before staring at Izuku intently. When can we fucking stop this boring shit and make out again? Izuku spluttered. Kachan! He cried, heat flooding up his neck and into his face. You can't just say things like that. Why the fuck not? Katsuki raised an eyebrow with a grin that looked like it'd been inherited from the devil himself. And you're one to talk. Don't pretend you didn't just call me Kachan to get a rise out of me. Izuku looked down shyly, fidgeting his fingers in his lap. Do you not like it? The shift in dynamic between them was something new to navigate, something wholly unfamiliar that brought his lack of experience into sudden, sharp focus. He was still feeling out the boundaries, still self-conscious about what to say, how to act, how to reach for Katsuki and ask directly for what he wanted. Katsuki, on the other hand, seemed to have taken it all in stride with his usual cocky self-belief. Of course I like it, he said, setting the flashcards down on the sideboard and moving to join Izuku on the couch. The cushion sank under his weight, rolling Izuku slightly towards him. I like it too much. It's fucking distracting. Oh. Flirtatious banter had Izuku at a loss for words. You're distracting, Katsuki added, scooting closer so they were shoulder to shoulder. Speaking of which, Izuku squawked, swallowing and clearing his throat before he went on. I feel terrible about the game last week. I know it was my fault that you weren't in good form and Oi, none of that. Katsuki snapped his fingers in front of Izuku's face before the torrent of apology could spill from his mouth. I was being an asshole when I said it was your fault, okay? I was angry and jealous. That's not on you. But the scout... Deku, it's fine. Coach sent the guy some videos, and he set me up to join a college practice next week. Then he'll see what I can really do. The guilt stuck around, but Izuku tried his best to put it to one side. Okay. Sneaking a sideways glance at the strapping figure beside him, he asked what he really wanted to know. Were you really that jealous? Katsuki exhaled a dramatic sigh. You kidding me? I was this fucking close to tearing that piece of shit's arm off when I saw you two together. You were? Katsuki rolled his eyes in a way that definitely said, give me strength, sighing again, emphatically. Christ, Deku. Your self-esteem's about as resilient as a fucking ice cream. Is it that hard to believe you're a hot piece of ass? Izuku spluttered and fell into a fit of choking laughter. He had never expected the words hot piece of ass be used to describe himself, much less coming from Katsuki Bakugo's mouth. Well, I mean, isn't modesty a virtue? He said jokingly once he got in a hold of himself. Katsuki gave him a long pointed look. Since when did you care about virtues? Like you're the epitome of fucking innocence or something. He mimed answering the phone with his fingers. Oh hey Deku, Mother Teresa called and she says she wants her habit back. Izuku grinned at him, nerves beginning to unwind. Mother Teresa didn't wear a habit, Kachan. I guess I'll just have to keep it after all. Katsuki just shook his head. You know, you talk a whole damn lot, Freckles, he said in a drawl that made Izuku think of a big cat stretching out his spine, relaxed but dangerous. His hand slid over to rest on Izuku's thigh, palm big and warm and nice, exuding heat that seeped out into the surrounding skin until Izuku's whole leg was sweltering. With a light squeeze from Katsuki's fingers, Izuku realized he was looking down at it, lips softly parted. So you keep telling me, he replied, distracted. You need to learn to relax. Something crackled in the air between them, sparks or electricity, or maybe just the heady tension of adolescent lust. Izuku felt a stirring in his gut, blooming and spreading down his thighs, a tingling over his skin that he could swear fell in rhythm with the soft buzz of the heating unit. He looked into Katsuki's eyes, then drew his gaze down to linger at his lips. Maybe you could help me. Katsuki inhaled sharply, chest barreling with air. Fuck, he hissed on the exhale, breath tickling Izuku's cheek. Come here. Then he leaned forward to seal Izuku's mouth with a kiss. Every time it happened, it was like Izuku's soul left his body for a moment or two, drifting above them to watch from a height before his senses hauled him back to his physical form. The feel of Katsuki's grip tightening unbearably high on his leg, the warm, wet tongue that slid eagerly into his mouth. They started slow, every touch careful and deliberate, luxuriating in each other, savoring one another like a rich dessert. Katsuki's tongue coaxed Izuku's mouth open wider, slipping in deeper with a groan, hot and keen. Where Izuku was tentative, Katsuki led the way with a total lack of fear. There was no trepidation in the way he tilted Izuku's chin up to meet him. No shame in the way he kissed like it was all he'd ever wanted to do. It sent Izuku into a tailspin, dazed and dizzy with the knowledge that someone could be so overwhelmingly hungry for him. Giddy with the idea of making Katsuki want him more. Of driving Katsuki so wild with desire he'd never look at anyone else. So he shifted forward and kissed back, willing his inhibitions to wither away, letting cautious hands do as they pleased now that nothing was off limits, roaming over sculpted shoulders, trailing fingertips over firm chest, and taking a second to appreciate just how big he was. There was no doubt in Izuku's mind that Katsuki could lift him up and sling him over a shoulder if he wanted to, could maneuver him into any position in which he was so inclined. And yet, despite his physical prowess, here Katsuki was, Kachan, groaning softly into Izuku's mouth like he'd burn the world to the ground for him, like he'd walk across scorching hot coals just to touch him, like Izuku was the one with all the power. The thought sent a pulse between his legs and an arrow into his heart, giving him the shot of courage he needed to hold onto Katsuki's shoulders for balance and loft the leg over his lap. And from there, any effort to take things slow was abandoned. Fuck, Katsuki murmured, hands drifting to rest on Izuku's ass as he got himself situated. You're gonna fucking kill me. He pitched forward to nestle into the crook of Izuku's neck, and Izuku couldn't help but moan at the sudden rush of blood and bliss brought on by the skim of lips to sensitive skin, erupting into goosebumps and totally losing his head. Biting down on his lip, he tilted to allow better access, silently offering himself up, wordlessly asking for more, please. And Katsuki gladly branded him with tongue, kissing and then sucking, then kissing again. Kachan, Izuku whispered, all breath gone from his lungs. You'll leave a mark. Yeah, I fucking intend to, was the only response he got before Katsuki was doing it again in another spot, probably leaving a solid collection of hickeys up Izuku's throat. Izuku just sighed and closed his eyes, letting go of all the intrusive thoughts that usually littered his brain, forgetting all the buts and maybes and what-ifs, and focusing instead on the little shivers of pleasure that crept into every far-flung nerve ending, a coiling heat that melted him down until he was liquid and sticky. He was already so fucking hard, harder than he'd ever been in his life, and everything felt better than he'd imagined in his sordid little daydreams. So much had been missing when he'd pictured it in his head. Katsuki's muffled grunts of appreciation, the strong hands rocking his hips down in a slow, intentional grind that made the couch springs creak. His jeans were a sauna and a stifling cage, and he wanted them off, wanted to make Katsuki feel good. God, he'd never been more glad that Mr. Bakugo worked so late. Still nuzzling at Izuku's neck, Katsuki seemed to be having similar thoughts, halting the enthusiastic circles he was massaging into Izuku's ass to slip a hand between them, brushing over the spot where denim dragged across denim with agonizing tautness. But just as his hand was reaching the throb in Izuku's jeans, he paused, nosing up Izuku's neck to his jaw, kissing across his cheek to his mouth. He grazed their lips together with tantalizing softness, a moment of sweetness amidst the whirlwind of lust. Then he sat back against the couch, eyes gentle. "We don't have to do anything," he said, fixing Izuku with an earnest expression. "We can do whatever the fuck you want. We can just play video games if that's all you want to do right now." The cut of his jaw was beautiful, angular and set in seriousness, and Izuku wanted to kiss it. So he did. He leaned forward and took what he wanted for once. "I want to keep going," he mumbled against rough, stubbly skin, unable to completely set aside a lifetime of shyness all at once. "I want to make you feel good." Jesus Christ. But, Izuku tried to put a lid on his arousal for a second, tried to let it simmer so he could peer through the rising steam before it all bubbled over and made a mess. "Before, you said, are you sure you want to? If you've never, thought about anyone like that?" Katsuki studied him for a moment, the embers of his eyes flickering to life. "I never thought I would," he said slowly, like he was coming to the realization at the same time as he said the words. "There's never been anyone else that I've wanted like this. Not in the way I want you." Shit and fuck and every other curse word in the dictionary. Izuku's stomach swarmed with butterflies, and his crotch unequivocally twitched. "Okay, well, good. That's good." He swallowed and looked away, avoiding Katsuki's gaze for the impending revelation of his own. "I should probably tell you that, I've also never done anything like this before. I might not be very good at it." As soon as the words left his mouth, fingers were at his chin, forcing him to meet Katsuki's eyes. "It'll be good, because it's you," he said, with such firmness it made Izuku's heart sink. "But if you're not ready—" "I am," Izuku interrupted, from his seat atop Katsuki's lap, straddling him like a throne. He had a rare view of that beautiful face tilted upwards to look at him, meeting him halfway. In another moment of boldness, he moved hands to cup Katsuki's cheeks, rolling his hips down just a fraction. "I am ready." An expression of desire and something else that might have been relief slipped across Katsuki's face, cheeks flushed and red like he sat out in the sun for too long. Izuku bent to kiss him fully, confidence building with every throaty noise from Katsuki's mouth, every long sigh exhaled in the moments between kisses, every odd look Katsuki gave him, like Izuku was something precious and rare, his most coveted treasure. The large hand skimming his jeans finally pressed down to apply pressure to Izuku's straining hard-on, and he almost yelped at the live wire shock. "Oh God," he whispered without meaning to, clutching at Katsuki's face like it could keep him anchored to the spot. "Fuck." Katsuki rubbed along the outline of Izuku's dick, palms smoothing slow, delicious strokes up and down that made him shudder and bite down on his lip, hips canting up and rocking into the motion. Fuck. Fuck, it felt good. Too good. He couldn't get carried away before he had the chance to make things reciprocal. Forcing himself to pull back slightly so he could meet Katsuki's eye with what he hoped was heavy-lidded seduction, Izuku trailed a hand down the front of Katsuki's jersey. A muffled little noise slipped from his lips when he traced down the seam of Katsuki's pants and found that he was hard as hell too. Experimentally, he tried copying Katsuki's motions, gripping and rubbing along his cock, drinking in the sharp hiss that drew out from between Katsuki's teeth, relishing the pulse against his hand. Katsuki's voice was a low and smoky rasp, another match tossed onto the kindling of Izuku's desire. "Need to get out of these fucking things." They fumbled with fastenings, fingers clumsy and urgent and desperate to give them release. Katsuki was first to reach the mark. Of course, when was he ever not? Yanking the waistband of Izuku's boxers aside so he could ease his dick free. The open air was cooler than the stifling heat of his pants, and the slight change in temperature made Izuku realize just how exposed he was. Sat on Katsuki Bakugo's lap, dick hard as a fucking rock and dribbling from the tip, all in plain view. He blushed, sudden embarrassment piercing through all otherwise horny thoughts. No one had ever seen him naked before. What if his dick looked weird? Or there was something wrong with him, and he'd never realized it? Or maybe he didn't function the same way everyone else did, or... Fuck, Katsuki said, staring down at Izuku's flush cock with wide eyes, taking it in hand and rolling his thumb around the head in a motion that almost made Izuku squirm. You're fucking perfect. He really looked like he meant it, and Izuku's heart stuttered in his chest, emotion bubbling up until tears stung his eyes at the worst possible moment. No, there was no way he was going to fucking cry because Katsuki Bakugo was about to give him a hand job and had told him his dick looked nice. So he quickly blinked everything back and focused on stuffing a hand down tight black boxers, pulling Katsuki's dick out too. They sat there, pausing, a moment that swelled with anticipation. Then, looking up from where he'd been gazing down between them, Katsuki let go of Izuku's dick and grabbed at his hand. Oh shit, had he changed his mind? Had they gone too far? What are you... Without breaking eye contact, he lifted Izuku's hand to his face, turning it over to place a gentle, full-lipped kiss to the palm. Then under the soft, diffused glow of the basement light, he extended his tongue and licked a hot stripe against it, taking each of Izuku's fingers in turn and sucking them into his mouth. Holy shit. Izuku was going to explode. There, Katsuki said, only satisfied when Izuku's fingers were wet and glistening, returning them to his dick before giving his own fingers the same treatment. Ready now. Izuku knew he was positively gawking, the thrum of blood in his ears as loud as the roar of the crowd at one of Katsuki's football games. But now was not the time to get sidetracked, and so he set his astonishment aside in favor of focusing on the task at hand. Gripping loosely at Katsuki's shaft, he began a careful stroke, slow and steady, aided by the slip of saliva. It made a slick sound that had Izuku about ready to pass out, awed by the pulse and swell of Katsuki's dick in response to his touch, the way it oozed from the slit, smearing beneath Izuku's thumb as he swirled around the head. Fucking hell, Deku, Katsuki rasped, legs spread and head thumping back solidly against the paneled wall. He mirrored Izuku's languid pace, when he'd wrapped his fingers around Izuku in turn, wetting it all over and stroking indulgently. It was a feeling no amount of frantic jerking off could match, and Izuku's hips jolted forward involuntarily, stuttering up into Katsuki's fist. You like that? Katsuki asked, grin spreading wide across his face, voice so full of confidence it was more of a statement than a question. Still, Izuku answered. Yes. Good. Katsuki increased the speed of his lazy pump, hand so big it wrapped around Izuku's cock with ease. Every time he paused at the tip, and then sank his hand down, twisting slightly and squeezing just the right amount, a wave of pleasure surged through Izuku so forcefully he felt he might buckle under the weight of it. He wasn't going to last long at this rate. He quickened his own motions, attending to Katsuki from root to tip with increasingly frenzied movements, looking down between them and groaning at the sight of their hands in tandem. Feels good, he said, voice so thick he could barely recognize it. Fuck yeah, it does. Katsuki agreed, looking up to meet Izuku's gaze, eyelids heavy and eyes dark in the dim light, nearly ruby red and brimming over with desire. Don't stop, Deku. Shit, I'm fucking close already. Hearing him say it only pushed Izuku closer to the edge, winding him tighter and tighter until he was ready to explode. Me too, he gasped, and Katsuki ducked forward to kiss him, mouths open and sloppy, tongues rolling over each other as their hands kept up the new pace and each wave of pleasure built into a crescendo, slamming over Izuku until he was shuddering and releasing, white hot and molten. Shit, Fuck. Katsuki was coming to, warm and sticky over Izuku's hand, broad chest heaving and eyes squeezed shut. Holy shit, Deku. Several quick gasps caught in the air as they each rolled their orgasms out to the end. Izuku's forehead slamming down against Katsuki's shoulder, teeth sinking into his lip. He felt himself shiver with contentment and release, a surge of emotion rolling over him so intense, he almost let out a sob. A minute or two of silence stretched out as they caught their breath, Izuku waiting for the high to dissipate. His mind was serene, still, quiet for once. All anxious thoughts flung to the winds. He wanted it to stay like that forever. That was... Yeah. Katsuki's voice was rough and rumbling, a hint of uncharacteristic disbelief somewhere in his tone. Izuku couldn't quite bring himself to look at him just yet. Face still pressed to the mountainous shoulder, he eyed the mess between them instead. I'll go get a tissue, he said quickly, hearing the creep of nervousness return to his voice as he shuffled back slightly. Oi. Katsuki's hands were at his back, holding him in place so he couldn't wriggle away. You in a rush to get out of here, Freckles? Didn't have you down as a hit it and quit it kind of guy. I'm not. His eyes finally snapped up to meet Katsuki's, finding pupils so wide they nearly eclipsed the amber rim. Izuku stared back into them. There you are, Katsuki said softly, blinking slowly like a cat. Leaning forward, he pressed a kiss to Izuku's lips, ignoring their sticky hands and messy clothes. So gentle and affectionate, Izuku felt his chest crack open and beating heart fly into Katsuki's waiting hands. He could only pray he'd keep it safe. When they broke apart, Katsuki's face remained soft for a moment, before a flash of his usual cockiness returned. You know, your hand's actually pretty fucking dexterous, he said. Could probably finish that final damn level of one for all if you put a bit of that wrist action to good use. Izuku gaped. I can't believe you're literally a heathen. You love it. Katsuki smirked, showing his teeth in an evil grin. Come on, let's get cleaned up. We got a villain to beat to a pulp. And as naturally as that, he heaved Izuku up off his lap like it was nothing, seating him down on the couch as he padded off to find a Kleenex. Izuku slumped back against the cushions, wondering if the last half hour could have been an elaborate hallucination crudely conjured up by his brain. But no, the basement around him wasn't too sharp a focus, the sound of Katsuki's rustling too vivid. It was no dream. He'd actually just fooled around with someone for the first time. And that person had been Katsuki freaking Bakugo. It was real. As implausible as it seemed, it was real. That, or he died and gone to heaven. And be honest, at this point, Izuku didn't really care which it was.